Tune in tonight. Minnesota tonight. Minnesota tonight.
Thank you. Tonight, we'll take 10 to talk about high school graduation, the only thing powerful enough to end High School Musical. But sadly, it was not powerful enough to end Glee. Graduating high school is important for many reasons, from the economic and social opportunities a diploma affords, to the privilege of wearing a class ring, a piece of jewelry that lets everyone in a room know that the best years of your life are behind you. Recently, there has been some exciting news about the number of students nationwide who are graduating from high school.
Good news about education in the United States. The high school graduation rate has hit an all-time high.
That rate has improved to 82% in the 2013-2014 school year.
It's woo! 82%, a B minus. Nothing says America like celebrating slightly above average. But there's just one tiny little qualification to that.
But there are still some gaps depending on race and where students live.
Yes, like a suburban outlet mall, there are definitely some gaps. But that can't be a problem for us here in Minnesota. I mean, we're like super smart. Like, literally, we put the M in NPR, so... Yeah, so... We do. Look it up. And we are regularly reminded of our intellectual superiority by the media. Recently, the Washington Post named Minnesota as one of the smartest states in the nation after one of its reporters saw us solve a difficult math equation while we were supposed to be doing janitor stuff. We are basically a state full of Doogie Howser PhDs reading Immanuel Kant in the original German while preparing for our oboe recital. So, I gotta know, what's Minnesota's high school graduation rate? Tell me so I can frame it and put it on my wall of state pride next to Paul Bunyan's hatchet and a picture of Minnesota kicking Wisconsin where curds. Come on, just tell me.
We are slightly below the national rate. Our graduation rate here is 81% overall.
Wow.
Fuck! But below average? I mean, what are we, Iowa?
Iowa, our neighbors to the south,
yeah.
Top graduation rate in the country, 90%.
Wow.
Fuck! Iowa. How can they be smarter than us? I mean, their state university mascot is a bird unsuccessfully escaping a blender. Okay, while it may hurt our state pride to know that we couldn't even top a place where it's legal to marry a bale of hay, when you look at the numbers more in depth, you will find a surprisingly large number of Minnesota high school students do not graduate. As of 2015, only 81% of public high school students graduated on time. That means out of the 65,000 high school seniors in Minnesota any given year, 12,000 of them are not graduating. Meaning, in every 4 years, 48,000 people leave high school without earning a degree, which for reference is the size of the entire town of Edina. And a lot like Edina, this is particularly terrible for minorities. It's true. Data from the U.S. Department of Education shows that when compared to other states, Minnesota has one of the lowest graduation rates for African American, Native American, and Asian American students. And Minnesota has the lowest graduation rate in the entire country for Hispanic students. It's truly a bad sign when the annual crop of Minnesota high school graduates has as much racial diversity as an episode of Friends. Sure, there are some people of color, but definitely not as many as there should be. Now, while there are many factors that contribute to a student's academic success, one closely connected to graduation rates is the number of student support staff. The term support staff refers to nearly all the professionals that work with students outside of a classroom, which includes guidance counselors, psychologists, nurses, and social workers. Basically, it's anyone who has to deal with when shit goes down. And while people with these positions don't directly teach students, as their name suggests, they provide the social, mental, and administrative support students need so that they can learn. Just listen to this Minnesota guidance counselor discuss all the things they do as part of their job.
We work in the classroom doing developmental guidance lessons, working on helping the kids develop certain social skills that they're going to need, conflict resolution skills, things like that, anger management, how to deal with stress.
Now, that's super important because school isn't easy. In early education or later, learning how to not go insane while sitting under fluorescent lights for 8 hours a day is an acquired skill. And support staff exist because sometimes we all need help remembering how to do that. But since the early 1990s, Minnesota has spent a minuscule 2.3% of all education funding on student support staff. That's less than half the national average. And it has only gotten worse in the last 10 years. In 2006, when the state was experiencing budget shortfalls, then the Minnesota governor, Tim Pawlenty, the son of a manila envelope and an oversized suit jacket, slashed education spending and proposed legislation that would require 70% of the state's school budgets to be spent only on classroom instruction. Because if the state is short on money, obviously we should take it out on the children. Pawlenty might as well have proposed generating revenue by holding kids by their ankles and shaking them lunch money from their pockets. Nothing describes Republican policy better than sacrificing tomorrow's future to solve today's problems. Since then, with limited resources and no state minimums for numbers of student support staff, Minnesota has had one of the highest student to support staff ratios in the country. Let's check back in with that counselor.
I am the only school counselor, and we have about 600 students.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. One adult taking on 600 students seems almost impossible, even if that counselor was John C. Thank you, my 13-year-old cousin Tyler, for that joke. But honestly, that counselor is comparatively lucky because the average student-to-school counselor ratio in Minnesota is 743 students to 1 counselor, which is more than double the ratio suggested by the American Association of School Counselors. And while that certainly sucks for the overworked school counselors, it's even worse for the students. High school students who don't have sufficient access to a school counselor may not know if they have taken the classes they need to graduate, or what to do when they are struggling in math or English, or let alone anything in the college application process. And access to support services is even more important for students of color who are disproportionately affected by poverty and attend under-resourced schools. When the lack of support staff is taken into consideration, it's really no wonder that graduation rates are so low. Because when people say it takes a village to raise a child, the same still applies to help a student graduate from high school. And thus far, we have pretty much been burning the village and sending our kids to be raised by wolves in the wilderness. Maybe they'll found Rome or something. Luckily, Minnesota State Senator Susan Kent has proposed legislation that would increase funds for student support staff throughout the state. However, there are no guarantees that this legislation will pass, so here at Minnesota Tonight, we have come up with a solution. In order to reach all the Minnesotan students that aren't getting the help that they need, we are going to reach students the only way adults know how these days: internet memes. That's right, we've come up with the official Minnesota Tonight meme to do all the important work student support staff should be doing, but can't because they haven't been hired. Starring Minnesota icon Paul Bunyan. So, prepare to meet your new school nurse, a photo of Paul Bunyan in a lab coat. Awesome. Introduce yourself to the social worker, Paul Bunyan. He's emotionally available and sits backwards in a chair. His silence means he's listening. And finally, meet high school guidance counselor Bunyan, who was simultaneously going to schedule your senior year, write you a recommendation for college, and ensure you graduate on time, but because he has 743 other students to get to, he won't be able to meet with you today. That's our show. Stay nice, Minnesota. Good night.
Minnesota Tonight. Yeah. Tune in. Minnesota Tonight. Tune in. Minnesota Tonight. Minnesota Tonight. Tune in. Minnesota Tonight.